Okay, good evening and welcome to the October 8th meeting of the governing body. I call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Miller, who will provide the invocation, stand as you are able, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening. Please center your hearts and minds on the following Albert Einstein quote. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. Today, may we live in the moment and prepare for the future, taking joy in our opportunity to recommit ourselves to transparency and community servitude. As we gather today, as colleagues, friends, and community advocates with common issues about infrastructure, chronic homelessness, and other issues, we pledge that we will continue to make a difference in the lives of the people of our city. A peer once told me that I am just one vote. And on the record, it may look like that. But as we all know, we don't just live on paper. I, along with the rest of you, are not just what is on the ink from what we did before. We are able to be in this moment together, but also have the opportunity to do something for the future. My vote comes from empathy and factual information. My vote turns into my dollars being spent in this community. My dollar turns into action. My actions turn into understanding. My understanding turns into more empathy. Although most citizens, or some citizens, may think we live in a monolith society, we certainly do not. It's having that basic understanding, making sure we learn from our history and progress to the future and put action behind our words, which voters pit us here to do. Thanks for lending me your ear, and let's shoot for a quick meeting this evening.
Amen.
Thank you, Councilman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good words, good words. Okay. Next on the agenda is the roll call. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Padilla,
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Here.
Valdivia Acala,
Here.
Ortiz,
Here.
Banks,
Here.
Kell,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Dobler,
Here.
Duncan,
Here.
and Hofer.
Here.
All right, we have 10 present.
Thank you. Join me, Chief. Next on the agenda is a proclamation, and it's appropriate that I have Chief Phillips here to receive this proclamation on behalf of all the men and women of the Topeka Fire Department. A proclamation by the mayor. Whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and while our homes are the locations where people are at their greatest risk from fire, these fire emergencies can happen anywhere. And whereas fires in the city of Topeka caused the death of 10 people in the last 2 years, and the Topeka Fire Department has responded to over 700 structure fires in the last 2 years, and whereas the Topeka Fire Department, with the support of the American Red Cross, installs free smoke alarms and inspects hundreds of commercial structures annually in order to keep our citizens safe. And whereas the City of Topeka firefighters are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of fires and injuries through prevention, protection, community risk reduction projects, and education. And whereas the 2024 Fire Prevention Week theme, smoke alarms that make them work for you, and now therefore I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the City of Topeka, do hereby proclaim the week of October 6th through 10th, 2024 as Fire Prevention Week, and urge all citizens of Topeka to support the many public safety efforts of the City of Topeka Fire Department to keep our community safe. In witness thereof, I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the City of Topeka, Kansas, do hereby affix my official signature and the official seal of the City of Topeka, Kansas on this day, 8th day of October, 2024. Thank you, Chief, for everything that you do and what all the department does for us in this city of Topeka. I know it'd be more appropriate if Councilwoman Ortiz would be here, but if you could, and you can certainly offer any comment.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It's my honor to accept this on behalf of all the men and women who wear the uniform and work every day at the utmost of their abilities to keep the city safe. As the mayor said, the theme this year is smoke alarms, make them work for you. We talk about it over and over. Councilwoman Ortiz is our biggest champion about our free smoke alarm program, and that's been an excellent partnership that we've had for a number of years now with the Red Cross. You can go on the city's website, www.topeka.org, go to the fire department page, and under programs is the link to you can register, fill out the application to have us come out and install free smoke alarms in your home. You can also, if you live outside of the city, you can go to www.getalarmedks.org, and that is a link for fire alarms, smoke alarms, for people who live outside of the city through the state fire marshal's office. So if anybody's listening, they don't live within the city limits, you can go to that website as well. We have a number of events community engagement events that we participate in throughout the year where we try to get this message across. And this Friday evening from 5 to 7, we will have fire companies at each one of the Walmarts across the city with applications in hand for smoke alarms. So it'll be a chance for our citizens to interact with our folks, as well as if you don't have smoke alarms, you can fill out an application and we'll get you set up to get those to you. So I also don't want to forget our public safety, public information officer, Rosie Nichols, and some of our team at the department has done a great job of putting together a social media campaign for this week. So you may have already started to see some of the rollout with that yesterday, but each day throughout the course of this week, we'll have different posts related to fire safety tips and some instructional videos as well, and safety videos on there that there'll be links to as well. So I would encourage everybody to visit those, to practice fire safety in their homes. If you don't have smoke alarms, please get with us. We're more than happy to come out. Gives our folks a chance to interact with you as citizens, and also help keep you safer in your homes. But that is just also one piece of the fire prevention efforts that we do throughout the year. As the mayor talked about in the proclamation, our inspectors are out working hard every day, inspecting commercial occupancies to keep you safe when you're in those, as well as our overall community risk reduction efforts that we do, including our fire safety education within the schools to our public education officer.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I told you this was my favorite month because of the smoke detectors. What he didn't say is that they're free and they will be installed free. And what he didn't say is that they're 10-year smoke alarms. So you don't need to change the batteries or the detectors for 10 years. So if you go in your house and you have one of those detectors that you're still pulling the battery out, they're probably over 5 years old. So guess what? That means they're no good because you've got to change your smoke detectors every 5 years. Did you know that? So I need you, I really, really, really need you to love yourself and love me enough to go ahead and get these applications, fill them out, and send them in. Now, you guys are sitting up here laughing at me, but I want to say something in all seriousness. I was sitting here one time, and I'll be through in a minute, Mayor.
No, you're fine.
I was sitting up here one time, and I was talking, and there was somebody, and I'm not going to point them out. There's two people I will talk about. One person did an overkill and had 15 smoke detectors that he put in. I'm not going to point it out, but it's probably somebody who's red-faced right about now. Had he let our people, our expertise come out, I'm sure they would not. He would have got free smoke detectors, and they wouldn't have put in 15. Am I correct?
Unless he has a really big house.
Unless he, well, he doesn't. I'll use another instance. There's also another person who's sitting to my left, I won't say who it was, that said, oh, Councilwoman, I don't have a smoke detector. And I had the guys get over there right away and get somebody that was remodeling their house a smoke detector. A smoke alarm, I'm sorry, a smoke alarm. She is also safe now. So as we're sitting here laughing, there's somebody in this room that's saying, ooh, shoot, I better hurry up. Yes, you need to hurry. Please help our firefighters and our chief and our captains, help them be safe. They do work. I had a bedroom that caught on fire, and that was it. They detained to the bedroom because my alarms were going off. So please, 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 in all seriousness, and if you have 15 alarms, you can get the application and give it to somebody that can fill it out and do it the right way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Smokey Ortiz. You did. Good comments. We'll move on now to appointments. Madam Clerk.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Jeff Lawley to the Topeka Planning Commission for a term ending October 8, 2027.
Okay. We've heard the appointment as read. Is there a motion? Motion to approve by Councilman Dobler, second by Councilman Miller. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Hofer.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, that person is not in attendance this evening. Oh, earlier they said he wasn't. Earlier they told me you weren't. Communication is not good. Mr. Lawley, would you stand so that we can applaud you for your service? Says right here, not attending. We'll move on to item number 4, presentations. Madam Clerk.
The first presentation we have is for general obligation bonds, and Josh McInerney, budget manager, and it looks like Ben Hart, our interim CFO, is presenting.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll actually turn to Josh and to Ben to lead us through this item.
Good evening, everybody. So we've gotten a lot of questions about just our debt. What is it? How much do we have as a city? And we thought also this was a timely presentation given the fact that a couple weeks back we shifted our mill levy to where our mill levy remained flat, but more of it went into our general operations rather than into our debt service fund, which pays our debt. So kind of want to just give a quick presentation on what the implications of that were and some other information. So we have 2 types of debt: general obligation bond debt and our revenue bond debt. General obligation bond debt in our city is primarily funded through our property taxes, and at the mid-year of 2024, we had a principal balance of about $130 million. Our utility debt, which we'll get to in presentations later in the year, was much higher at $373 million, but like I said, we'll get to that later. And then we had temporary financing on a project, which was our hotel. We have not fully permanently bonded that project yet. Reason being is depending on the direction the governing body takes, it's more advantageous to have that temporary noted in case we wanted to give that to a developer, get outside the city's hands, et cetera. So the main takeaway is through the mid-year, what our property taxes primarily fund in terms of debt is that $130 million number. Now, having a number is fine, but we'd like to also compare to other cities. Or I'll get to that in another slide. So just some information, just general information, like I said. Primarily revenue source is property taxes and then motor vehicle taxes and some special assessment revenue. And then expenses are just our bond and interest payments on our issued debt. Now, in our audited report that we went over back in, I think, late July, early August, our revenues, we took in more revenues than we spent in that fund. So due to increasing property values, and then the council giving the policy directives to use ARPA money to fund projects and cash to fund projects from surpluses, we've actually built up quite a substantial fund balance in that fund. to where we have about a $15 million fund balance at the end of 2023, which about 70%, our minimum percentage balance is 10%. So the debt service fund is healthy, and it has a lot of capacity to go whatever direction the governing body chooses. Now, that second to last bullet, balance to assessed value. According to state statute, we can only bond up to 30% of our total assessed value. So max is 30% of what our total assessed value was. We're at 7.89% at the end of 2023. So we're well off our what the state limit is. And then finally, our bond rating is the second highest, is a AA. That's good news. We've went over that before, but that's just some kind of quick hitters. So compared to other cities, that's Wichita, KCK, Lawrence, Olathe, Manhattan. Our total principal balance is on the lower end compared to those comparables. Now, some of those cities are larger, have more infrastructure needs, and their governing bodies choose to fund things different. So we like to do it on a per capita basis, which is on the next slide. But I want to underscore one thing, is the reason we use principal balance to compare is other cities may have different interest rates, so we like to take out that noise and just compare the principal balance. Because if Lawrence has a average of 4% and we have an average of 3%, we include that in. It doesn't give an apples-to-apples comparison on that way. So when comparing on a per capita basis to other cities, we're a little under 1,100, while most of those other cities are either right or a little higher than us, or a lot higher than us. The only one being lower is Wichita. So I view that as the governing body's doing its job. Usually the sweet spot is around $1,200 per citizen, so we're pretty well below that. And then that's that slide. And then finally, we've gotten a lot of questions on the last 10 years, how have our principal balances looked? So this slide, we're kind of an outlier, which in some cases is a good thing, to where our principal balances actually went down in the last 10 years. So it was about 160 in 2013 to where now we're down to about 136. So our total debt is going downwards. Kind of like when you pay off your mortgage, your principal balance goes down. That's how ours has been. And so I know this is kind of a numbery slide, but we wanted to also project where we were previously where we're at, but here's where we're going. So, and you'll see the project list in a little bit. So that first table shows if we kept our mill levy at the 9.717 of what we just said at, those would be our projected revenues coming in. And based off future CIP projects, if the council chose, hey, we're going to stick to the plan in the CIP, that's what we're going to bond, those would be projected expenses based off a 4% interest rate in the future. Now, interest rates could change, but this is just a projection to show where we could be at. Now, we would be dwindling that fund balance down quite a bit, but we're still well above that 10%, and then we're still above 40% over the next 5 years. That does not preclude the council from delaying projects, pushing projects, if they think that if financial times change or there needs to be recalibration on how we're funding things. And so the next chart shows that we are creeping back up in that total principal amount. And as you'll see on the very last slide, that makes some sense because we have a large city hall project going on that's being bought in, and our parking garages are that are currently being renovated are partially bonded. So we do have some major projects that will need to be bonded in the future. And also that takes account as also that temp note turning into a permanently bonded project, which is the hotel. So we wanted to show kind of the most expensive case scenario. I won't say worst case, but the most expensive case scenario. Now, Councilman Member Hiller requested this slide to show what our projected P&I payments overall towards our general obligation would look like in the future. Pretty consistent over time. Granted, that's why we look at the principal balance, just to show where we're at and where we're going, because sometimes the interest rates fluctuate. We like to look at that principal balance. And then lastly, this is the subject to change bonding list, and just to show what we could be bonding over the next 5 years. Obviously, we've already approved 24, but everything that is bonded is eventually approved by the governing body. An example I gave in the Policy and Finance Committee if we were to do this 2 years ago, this list would have had Elevation Parkway on it. But obviously there was a pivot in the direction we didn't want to do that project anymore. And so that was taken off the list, delayed, killed, whatever. So a lot of this is subject to change. This was just a starting point to show where we could be at in the next couple of years and to free up any confusion that there might be. And then our property tax, given our 4% assessed valuation increase, can support what we currently have. So it's not like on paper we're unsustainable. We're sustainable as of right now. So with that, we'll stand for any questions, but I'd also like if any members of the Policy and Finance Committee had any comments before questions, that's fine too.
Thank you, Josh. Questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Just a comment, and thank you, Josh, for putting the P&I payments in there. You know, the reason that that you see the payments drop and the balances drop on the sheets that Josh prepared was very intentional on the part of the council to bond things that needed to be bonded over time because they were big projects, to limit what we were doing. Our current policy says not more than basically $9 million a year. 27 million for 3 years is how it phrases it. We have gotten over that. And if you look at the, Josh, can you go back to the 5-year one that you had? Yeah, what you'll see is that balance with the list that he had on that back page, that fund balance is starting to go up, up, up. And that bottom line, 2024, up, what is it, $7 million. It ends up at 163 million in short order. Then if you could flip back to the piece that you sent me, I wanted him to line them up so you could see it change. But if you look at that, then we're at roughly 21.5 million. Actually, 21.1 million is what we're expecting the debt service to be this year. Then it starts to creep up. By 2029, it's up basically $2.4 million, and by 2030, it's up $3.5 million a year. And so that's all interest and servicing of this debt that could be used to pay cash for other things. You know, we'd worked really hard over these recent years to drive down what our indebtedness was. And with the idea that if we had extra money in the debt service fund, we could use it to pay cash for some of those recurring projects. I encourage everybody to look really hard at the list. Go back to the subject to change. At that bonding list, there's some big ticket items in there. I went through and looked at the things that are regular, and they still add up to only about that $9 million a year. But when you add the deferred maintenance for City Hall, that's a big hit in the first column. It's $8.8 million. That had we done it steadily over time, we might not have had that big ticket and not needed to do that. The parking facility repairs, you know, we're paying for that when we usually wouldn't. It would have been out of the enterprise fund of the parking system. So again, trying to make sure those things don't happen and that our enterprise funds are paying for themselves matters. Polk Quincy Viaduct, looking down, I think most of us didn't know that the 22 to 27 million city share for the current Polk Quincy project got sent over to the utilities. I thought it was going to show up here, and I'm sorry to see that, really. We had an opportunity to work a little bit harder, and people are gone, but to try and work with our state and federal legislators to not have to pay any of that at all. It's an unfunded federal mandate with an interstate going through our city. Representative of Senator Marshall's office was sitting next to me today at the Riverfront meeting, and he said, you know, we ought to be able to reach out and help you do things. And we talked about Polk Quincy again. There's 19 million for the second phase of Polk Quincy in this chart for 2028. If we can look at that and work with our staff to head off those big ticket items, and also to think about not just pulling money out of this debt service fund and spending it on salaries and operating expenses, but instead offsetting. I have some extra copies of what I handed out at the budget meeting, but every time we borrow $1 million, it costs us about $400,000 at least in borrowing expenses. That if we can pay cash for those things, that $400,000 can be spent on something else. Just want to encourage you. I mean, you can multiply that out as far as you want to go. It's a lot of money. So thank you for the presentation, but I just want to pitch us all to be vigilant and look for other sources of money or straight up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comment? Seeing none? Thank you very much, Ben, Josh. Madam Clerk?
The next item, presentation is the Mayor's Taskforce Against Domestic Violence 2023 Annual Report.
City Manager?
Still didn't do a good job on that.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the governing body. I'll ask Becca Spielman to lead us through this item.
I didn't hit it quite. Keep trying.
So there should be some handouts that are going around, but I'll go ahead and get started. A lot of what is in the presentation is referenced within this packet that you have, and there's some information in the packet that is not referenced in the presentation. So I definitely want to give plenty of time to talk through what's in here. First, I want to say thank you to Mayor Padilla, to the council members. Oh, thank you. And to City Manager Dr. Perez for giving me the opportunity to come and present today. My name is Becca Spielman. I am the Program Director for YWCA's Center for Safety and Empowerment. And this is the third installment of our Mayor's Task Force Against Domestic Violence annual report. So some of the information that you'll see here are things that we've seen for the past 2 years, so we can certainly talk about that. But I want to give you a bit of a recap here. So it's really quite lovely to have this presentation during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You may or may not be aware that October is annually Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And as part of the Mayor's Task Force Against Domestic Violence, what we're doing is we're working to hold offenders or people who cause harm accountable for their behavior, while also ensuring victim and survivor safety through collaboration, education, and prevention for a safe and just community for all. And I have several members of the Mayor's Task Force here with me if you all want to wave your hands. Yay. So really excited to have this level of support here today, and of course the support from our lovely mayor who heads this task force as well. So this data comes from a lot of the same entities that we've seen before. So the Shawnee County District Attorney's Office, the City of Topeka's Municipal Court, local law enforcement agencies, our Shawnee County Health Department, Kansas Legal Services, Disability Rights Center of Kansas, our battering intervention programs that are certified through the Attorney General's Office, Stormont Vale Health, and victim service providers all put together data from the 2023 calendar year to show you today. And so again, we've got a list of a number of different wonderful partners who are a part of the task force. There we go. All right, so as we dig right into what some of these statistics are, you can see kind of the breakdown here. But we saw that there were more than 2,100 domestic violence calls or calls that were flagged for domestic violence within our Shawnee County communities. Of those 2,100, about 1,314 arrests were made. There were also lethality assessment tools that were done through the Topeka Police Department. They put together that information for us and shared with us. And what that is that's measuring the level of lethality or likelihood of homicide that would occur. So what this is telling us is that there are 923 instances in 2023 where someone could have been murdered as a result of the violence that they were experiencing in their relationship. So we're certainly seeing a lot of dangerous situations that are happening here. In regards to some of those calls, you can see the filings that were happening in through our prosecutors. So we've got 1,231 referrals that were made to both the district attorney's office and the city of Topeka's municipal court, with 910 of those cases were filed. And then you can also see below, as you're looking through the report, what the successful prosecution rates look for and all of those things. Additionally, this is the first time that we've reported out on that, but there were 266 documented incidents of protection order violations from the Topeka Police Department. So again, recognizing that protection orders, although very helpful, sometimes aren't always the safest option for survivors. And then you can see that we had 177 Shawnee County residents who were represented in terms of protection order docket through the Kansas Legal Services or Disability Rights Center of Kansas. So just giving you a little bit of an idea of what that looks like within our civil and criminal justice systems. Furthermore, we're looking at battering intervention assessments being done in Shawnee County through the Family Peace Initiative and Washtage Peacemakers Men's Project. Again, those are the two agencies that are certified through the Attorney General's office. 91 assessments took place, and I'm happy to share with you that thanks to the incredible partnership that the City of Topeka has, as well as the YWCA has through their DCF grants, we are able to provide even more assessments and classes and sessions completed in 2024 because these funds allow us to be able to pay for individuals to get scholarships. So there's been a lot of hesitance for folks to be able to utilize battering intervention programs because of the cost. And we're here to tell you that with our partnerships, we've been able to address that barrier. So that's pretty exciting. So we'll have those numbers for 2024 to share with you all as well. Stormontville Health has implemented a new assessment question within their screening tool that's asking individuals whether or not they feel safe in their relationships. And so what they found was an additional 284 patients that came through their doors had identified that, yes, they do not feel safe in their relationships, many of whom may not have identified as experiencing domestic violence in the past. And then we have 825 unique individuals who were served in Shawnee County, living in Shawnee County through a number of different victim services providers, the Kansas Department of Corrections, Washburn University, and YWCA Center for Safety and Empowerment. There we go. So a little bit about some of the things that we learned through this process. So every year we talk about the strengths and the findings and how wonderful it is to have all of these entities from the public sector come together and partner with one another and talk about how we can address this as a societal issue, as a social issue, as a community issue, not just an individual issue. And this year we really started to look at some of the barriers that we found in being able to best serve folks and being able to provide for the greatest level of safety, being able to hold folks accountable. Those indicators right now that we consider to be most impactful in terms of unmet needs are lack of affordable housing in our communities, which again, I think we're all very aware of that, and limited public transportation options. So what we have found is about 98% of all domestic violence, relationships in which domestic violence occurs involves a financial abuse component. So what we know is statistically 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, and 1 out of every 2 gender non-binary or trans-identified individual will experience intimate partner violence at some point in their lifetimes. But we also know that across all socioeconomic levels, financial abuse is prevalent. So even for folks who are affluent, wealthy, highly educated, we still see financial abuse being a critical component, a tactic that abusers use in order to maintain that level of dependence upon them. So without having access to affordable housing or without having adequate public transportation, those barriers become even more significant and the safety concerns continue to grow, again, regardless of socioeconomic status for the victims and survivors we served. And then finally, last year there was a question about where are we seeing these instances occurring within our community? Can we look at things by zip codes? So I want to draw your attention within this report to kind of the middle section. So it's page 4 and 5. And you can see the Topeka Police Department, Dawn Mandley and her team, as well as the Shawnee County Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant Lewis and Christina Stevenson, put together this incredible breakdown for us so we can see where the instances in which domestic violence is being reported to law enforcement is primarily occurring. And I caveat that to say that there are a lot of barriers to folks in a number of communities reaching out to law enforcement. So this is just one piece of the puzzle in terms of what we're seeing within our community. But it was asked, where are we seeing this most often? And our law enforcement agencies were gracious enough to share that data with us. If you turn to the following page, page 6, you can see the incredible work that both Carrie Delfs and Brittany Blattner with the Shawnee County Health Department did to really showcase how these communities in which we're seeing those higher instances of domestic violence are also the same communities where we're seeing the largest gaps in terms of health equity. So I want to draw your attention to a couple of things on here. So one is to recognize that elevated reports of domestic violence in areas with higher levels of poverty and housing insecurity is what we're seeing within this report. But again, the caveat is we're seeing domestic violence occurring across socioeconomic levels. It's just individuals in certain communities may be less likely to report, may be less likely to call law enforcement, okay? And then one other thing I want to kind of draw your attention to is the idea that root causes for domestic violence are deeply embedded in the fabric of our communities, and it's influenced by economic and social factors that create environments where violence can thrive. And by addressing these social determinants of health, we can not only mitigate the incidence, of domestic violence, but also build stronger, healthier, and safer community for all residents. So, with that, I would like to again thank you so much for the opportunity to share this information. As I mentioned, there's several of us here who would be happy to answer any questions. We can certainly dig into this further at another time, but I definitely want to give you all an opportunity to ask anything that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Becca. Any questions for the lady? I want to thank you and all the members present, and even those who couldn't make it, for the work that you do. Oftentimes, your schedule for the meetings conflicts with standing meetings that I have, but when I can, I try to zoom in to listen to you because you guys do excellent work, and I like the diversity of the group that has taken this subject to where it is now, where we're really looking at it. I know that it's made a difference within our courts system. It's kind of made it busier.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, but at least it's being addressed, and I think that helps relieve some of the frustration that some of the victims might feel when they have a case pending, and they never see some resolution to it. And the correlation of services available for the victims is important. I think it impacts us in ways that really still we don't realize. Not just by the immediate victims, but families, neighborhoods, our whole general appreciation for safety in this community. So I want to thank you and the group again for all the work that you do and for the report.
Thank you. And I did want to let you know that we heeded your advice, and we are working diligently to get more youth service organizations as part of this. So we're very excited to have a more familial approach to looking at these issues.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No further questions? Okay, thank you
Thank
again.
you all so much.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk?
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Spencer Duncan granting the Bar and Grill an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibition B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Reverend Jonas Franco an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Robert Perez allowing and approving city expenditures for the period of July 27 through August 30, 2024, and enumerating said expenditures therein. D are minutes of the regular meeting of October 1, 2024, and there are no applications.
Okay. Body has heard the consent agenda is read. Is there a motion to accept? Motion to approve by Councilman Kell. Second by Councilwoman Hiller. If you call the roll call, please.
Councilmembers Valdivia Akla,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hiller.
Yes.
All right, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, action items. Madam Clerk?
A is approval of a commercial real estate sales contract between Mainline Development Group LLC and Mainline Printing Inc. in the city of Topeka.
City Manager.
Thank you. Mayor and members of the governing body, Braxton Copley, our Assistant City Manager, will lead us through this item.
Good evening, governing body members. Jason put together a very nice PowerPoint presentation, so you don't just have to listen to me drone on about this, but just in a nutshell, what we have are 3 documents in front of you. One is the real estate contract, and then in addition to that, we have a temporary easement and a party wall agreement. And then, of course, you've been provided with the project budget. So starting with the commercial real estate agreement, what we're looking at is purchase of 2.35 acres of property from Mainline Printing and Mainline Development Group for $1.6 million. This is at the location of the former Sears Automotive, which is in the White Lakes Mall, which is now adjacent. White Lake Mall doesn't exist, but it's adjacent to the Mainline Printing facility. You see the plat that we have put together showing the boundaries of that 2.35 acre tract, which include both the existing garage as well as a sliver inside the Mainline printing press facility. And then we will have an area for secured parking as well as employee parking. The temporary easement agreement is critical to give us the present possessory interest in the property and to allow us to pull those building permits because time is of the essence. For us to have this facility done by March 31st of 2025, when KDOT is going to knock down the existing facility, we need to get started immediately. And so our goal is October 21st to get the contractors started on the work in this. Next week at the City Council meeting, we will have the project budget amendment to amend that, as well as the contract establishing the guaranteed maximum price of the contract. So the hope is we get approval of real estate agreement tonight, those 2 items next week, and we are able to get the contractor started on October 21st. The other agreement that we have is the party wall agreement. For us to be able to get into the Mainline space under the current existing building codes, we have to create an area separation wall. We're calling it the party wall, and that is actually 2 separate and distinct concrete masonry unit walls through that Mainline facility that will go from the basement to the top of the ceiling. And there are no penetrations that are allowed in that wall, and that is to create basically this fire separation between these 2 facilities. Hence the need for the party wall agreement so that we know who's responsible for building it and that we know who's responsible for the ongoing maintenance over the course of the next 100 years that we hope to be partners with Mainline in terms of having that shared use facility with that single agreement. This ultimately is to get us to be able to have our own separate code space, as well as to be able to subdivide the land so that we are able to seek a municipal exemption on our part of the property. If we were just renting a space inside Mainline, that doesn't get it done. The property line is literally going to go between these 2 area separation walls that we're going to be constructing. So project budget. The great news is we have been successful in getting more money out of KDOT than we had initially anticipated. You see the delta here, total project cost, we're looking at 8.6 million. And right now, with the sum that we're looking at, almost $6.8 million from KDOT, we're looking at the city only having to come up with $1.8 million to be able to fund this project. That is significant. The 3.6 million involves the total KDOT compensation, which are the compensable items plus the cost of the land. And then we actually have those documents in place. Once we get approval of the council to sell our tract to KDOT, then the city manager will be able to do that. We have those slated for the November 12th meeting to get your approval on that, because that is necessary before we can convey our existing facility to KDOT in return for the $3.6 million of compensation. You can see the artist rendering of the existing building. So we're talking about, we're not changing the footprint of that. It's just a matter of some paint and some new doors to be able to make it look a little nicer than it currently does. And with that, I will gladly stand for any questions that you have, and I would respectfully request your approval to purchase this tract of land from Mainline for $1.6 million.
Any questions? Councilman Miller, then Councilman Dober.
Thank you, Mayor. Considering that time is of the essence, do we have to wait till November 12th?
Unless there's a willingness to waive some council rules to get it on earlier than that, but to be able to get the information to meet our 2-week deadline, and the fact that we don't have 2 meetings. I mean, the next week is our last meeting in October. Mm-hmm. And I just got the documents last week, so I was unable to get that in time for the October 15th meeting.
Yeah, and that's what that's my understanding as well. So that's why I'm checking to see, do we need to, because of the nature of this, do we need to set a special meeting?
No, the November 12th is to convey our existing facility to KDOT. They're not going to take possession of that until March 31st of 2025. And then the other thing, once we convey that to them, they will go ahead and make the payment to us for the $3.6 million. So we're okay waiting until November 12th for that particular item. But for the item tonight and the item next week, time is of the essence.
Thank you.
Councilman Dober.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Copley, I assume 6.6 million buys us a little bit more than paint and new garage doors, right?
Yes, sir.
How is the new facility going to compare to what we have right now?
Quite honestly, I am astonished by the fantastic job that our KBS has done in terms of putting together what is going to be a highly functioning, very attractive, very good-looking facility. If you've walked through it recently, there's a long way to go.
Great. The point I want to make is, we could have stayed where we're at if it wasn't for the Pope Quincy project. But now we're getting a very nice facility, at least $6 or $7 million worth. And really, it's costing us ultimately just a little bit south of $2 million for a facility that's going to last a long time, I assume, and allow us to provide better service for the vehicles in the city. So, what a great deal! And I'll just point out, I think, as with the viaduct project itself, KDOT has been a great partner. I think they've been a good partner through this process, although sometimes negotiations can be contentious and they've got to look out for their best interest. But again, a good partnership, and I'm sure that'll continue. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Braxton, will there be a fence around it?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I didn't see that on your little presentation there.
Yes, ma'am. There's a fence around the entire perimeter of the city of that 2.35 acre tract.
So it'll be in the front and the back.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How is it 10 foot?
I believe the zoning regulations allow us to go with 7 feet high of chain link and then 3 strands of barbed wire for a overall height of 8 feet.
And that's what we're doing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kell.
Initially, I was against this idea because I felt like what we wanted to do with that land was not necessarily plot some city property on there. It was to generate business. I believe you've done a really good job of getting the funds to help lower the cost of this. How much of the old building are we taking with us, if anything at all?
I don't know, Jason, do you might be able to speak more intelligently to that than I can?
We're taking about everything that's not nailed down. So anything in the building that we think is still of good use, fixtures, racking, lifts that can be moved and relocated, all of those items that we can reuse at the new facility, we intend to do that. Obviously, there are some items that it's not practical to move or they will not fit given the layout of the new facility, but pretty much everything that we can, we are working as hard as we can to reuse to lower the overall project budget.
That's why I was just trying to think, because yeah, if we were leaving a lot of stuff there, like you said, the lift racks, that it's one of those things of, I know there's tons of people out there who'd love to buy a set, and if we could sell those, cut the cost even more, that'd be great. But if we're taking most of it, then I don't think it's a cost feasible idea to try to get rid of it. So, okay.
Councilman Duncan and then Councilman Dobler.
Just 2 things. Thank you, Mayor. I guess the first is in regards to the fence. Is there anything we can, I mean, I understand why it's chain link and 7 feet and the barbed wire, that all makes sense. But is there anything we can put along there so it looks a little better than just a chain link fence with all over? I mean, you don't have to answer that now. I mean, I know there's wraps you can do. I know they have to be replaced over time, but especially since we're going to have all our vehicles in there, it seems like an additional security if people can't actually see everything that's going on through the chain link. So I'll just toss that out there for thought and consideration since we're building it on that corner and there is some retail over there. But the second thing is I really like this location. I know when we originally started this conversation, we had some other locations and we all were kind of like, if we have to. You know, they weren't ideal. And staff did a good job of continuing to search and hearing us say, we're not too excited about those first couple. And so I think it's not only a good location in general, but I'm glad that we're reusing an otherwise empty building that would, if we were not doing this, just sit there and continue to be empty. So it's a good reuse of otherwise a property that wasn't going anywhere. So I appreciate all the hard work by staff on this. So thank you.
Councilman Dobler.
Yeah, I'll echo that quickly. I know, on the infrastructure committee for several years now, we've been talking about this for
Years.
And really didn't come to a good conclusion. And as time got closer, it became apparent at some point that we'd have to have a temporary place and then build a new place. You guys have figured that out. You and your team, Jason, everybody. This is the best possible solution. I appreciate all the thought that's gone into it, and it's going to be great. I agree. It's a good location, being able to reuse the building. I know that building was discounted at first, and then you went back and looked at it. So I appreciate the due diligence there. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Healer.
Thank you. I too appreciate the diligence and that we've gotten to this point with the property. So good work, as well as with KDOT, because this is the best financial deal that we've looked at, I think, all the way along. Just some counterpoint about the security. I would encourage checking with the police department about crime CPTED principles, sometimes wrapping, which I heard come up in this exchange. We learned that with the zoo. If you can't see through the fence and you can't see if anybody's in there, and it's better off in many cases to have the inside of your parcel visible so that it can be monitored and safer. So I trust you to go through with whatever's best. But I drove down Kansas Avenue just, a couple days ago, and there are car lots all the way down and they're all wide open. with the cars parked near the street and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be part of really a continuum that has emerged along there. So I want people to feel like it's positive and a great place to take care of business. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan and Councilman Dobler.
I was going to move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Councilman Duncan, second by Councilman Dobler. Any other questions, discussion? Seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Ortiz?
Yes.
Banks?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hofer?
Yes.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
And Valdivia Aquila?
Yes.
All right, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to the next agenda, 7, non-action items. Madam Clerk?
A is discussion concerning the convening of a citizen government review committee to study and review the form of government for the city of Topeka.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you. Mayor and members of the governing body, I'll ask Amanda Stanley, our city attorney, to lead us through this item.
Thank you so much, Mr. City Manager. So a couple months ago, we gave a presentation that went over our forms of government, how we got here, as well as an overview of what the Citizen Government Review Commission is appointed to do. This is something that is in our city code, and it's required once every 10 years that the governing body convene a group of citizens to review our form of government, make suggestions on changes that are then presented to you as a governing body for you to decide if you would like them, if you don't like them, and then we continue through the process. At the time when we discussed that, you asked me to bring back to you in around this time of year, October, a resolution which will help kick off that process of convening the Citizen Government Review Committee. So in your agenda packet, I have filled in the mandatory portions of this resolution. So these are the things that the city code says you have to do. You have to name 5 people. They have to meet between January and June of 2025, and they have to submit their recommendations within 6 months of them being appointed. Their meetings have to be open to the public. They're allowed to look at areas of concerns, general findings, make recommendations, and they're allowed to recruit the assistance of other citizens or scholars in the field or professional municipal managers for participation on an ad hoc basis. Those are the things that are required. What our code does not say is how you go about picking those 5 people. It doesn't say if there are other additional qualifications or things that you would like the group to look at specifically. When you go back through time, these have been done in a wide variety of ways. Sometimes the mayor has picked and then they've been approved by the council. That's one option. You can also pick and draw names out of a hat, but they have to be widely representative of the diversity of our community is the important portion of it. Also on additional requirements, sometimes you have asked that they have at least one public comment period open where citizens can come, or that they have more than one public comment period, that they meet a minimum of so many times. So these are all things that I would open it up to hear your feedback so that you can tell me what you would like written in the resolution before you guys pass it.
Thank you, Amanda.
I
Councilman
have a
Miller?
question.
Oh, and Deputy Mayor? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Amanda, can you tell me in 2014, the last time it convened, what were some of the recommendations that they came through with?
Yes, I am going off memory, so forgive me if I get a couple of them mixed up. But one of the things they looked at a lot was city-county consolidation, whether or not that makes sense, recommendations on the county commission form of government. They also looked at the mayor's voting powers. When should the mayor vote? When should it not? And then I believe if you go back through the minutes, they also looked at benefits of the strong mayor form of government versus the city manager form of government, and discuss those. And I am happy to get you that packet.
I think if so, that's maybe something that could be shared with the full governing body. And do you know how the panel or the committee was determined in 2014?
I believe that the governing body submitted names to the mayor, who then selected 5, and then the governing body approved them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Miller, and then Councilman Dobler.
I would just put it out there that I think if we to get the people that are representative of the community, instead of it being people that we may know, which is not bad. I think we put it out there for nominations for people to be selected. The community knows their advocates better than we do. So I think that if they were nominating someone and someone just be like, yes, I would do that, and then they put an application in, because obviously you're going to get 100 nominations, but then you may only get 20 people who put applications in from those nominations, and that would allow us to be able to select people who really want to do it and not who just want to appease us as we go and ask them.
Councilman Dover?
Yeah, I'll have to think about that for a minute. I was going to say, I think I'd be comfortable if, council submitted maybe even 2 names each, and then the mayor made the selection. But I kind of like the self-nominating, or maybe that plus the ability for people to apply. You may get a few that we haven't thought of. So I think, I agree, the ability to get the biggest cross-section of folks to be able to pick from is very advantageous. Thank you, Mayor.
Further comments, ideas, thoughts? Having an application process that's been suggested, maybe we need to think about what that would be asked on that application, what kind of qualifications, what kind of involvement these persons who want to help us in this project, where they have been all along in working with the community, working with the governing body, how familiar they are. I just want to make sure that we get a good representation of people who understand as much as possible what it takes for a governing body to function. Councilman Dover.
I believe in 2014, there was at least one former council member on that committee, and I think that's important if that works, if we have somebody that's interested in that, because that allows the committee to have some history and discussion of the things that maybe were suggested that didn't work in the past or something like that. So hopefully we can have that again.
Good suggestion. Councilwoman Hiller.
I like the discussion and where it's going, and maybe, in fact, you kind of rolled out some good qualifications. In effect, the short job description would help all of us to think about people we would recommend, as well as for then you to use to kind of look at the different applications or recommendations and see who you think the best 5 might be. I like that, because actually you've got, with that self-nomination piece, we could simply develop it like the others that are already on the website, right? With a description of the task and the time period as just discussed, and some preferred qualifications, of course, not absolutely, and see what we get.
Councilman Duncan.
I don't have an issue with all of that, except I think we can fix, it's October. And so putting that process together, a questionnaire, what we want to be on it, taking those up and having that all done so that they can then turn around and already have a collective together by January seems tight. So my question to the legal is, can't we change TMC Chapter 2.2? I want to know. And I don't mean anything, I don't want to give them a year, and I don't want to give them one of the things about it that I find odd is that they have to do it within 6 months of appointment versus 6 months of their first meeting. Because you can literally lose a month or 2 months. Just if you appoint them in December, you've lost a month within that 6 months. And I don't know if there's a way to say instead of 6 months to meet, they have 8 so that you can appoint them, and then they have to meet within the 6 months of their first meeting, but they have 8 months to do it. So I don't know. And maybe that's going down a rabbit hole we don't want to go down. But as I look at the date, I think it's a good idea, but I'm worried that we're suddenly going to run into the end of the year and not have it. And it's going to be January, and then they're going to have to do it by June, and they need more time. And so I don't know. That's my only concern. Otherwise, I'm good with everything you're saying. I'm just trying to find a fix to make sure we're not. Or if we think we can get this thing done and get applications out by November and take them in November and have people appointed before first of the year, good for us. But that's my only thought.
City Attorney, do you have a response to
Ordinances can always be amended. They're just words on a page until you write new ones.
Councilman Kell, and then Councilwoman Hiller.
Would there be, is 5 the set number, or can we go higher than that?
5 is the set number in the current municipal code.
Okay, because I do like the Councilman Dobler's idea of a former council person, kind of gives them a good bounce off ideas and things like that, and where they can sit there and say, no, we can't actually do that, that's not within the bylaws of the city or whatever. But I also sit there and think, you know, we could talk about economic development in this town, so it's almost like a business owner or something like that would be a good aspect also, for the simple fact of, then they can talk about what it's like to try to work with our government from their aspect. And it's just, I know that's where I was hoping we can maybe have a little bit more than 5, so then that way we can have a little bit more, but I kind of want to pigeonhole too many spots for too many things, but at least, number 1, I like Councilman Dobler's idea.
Councilwoman Hiller, then Councilman Miller.
Let's keep it short. I do think the 5 seems to have worked well in the past, but having it be representative makes a lot of sense. They've done open hearings so that people could then present their ideas, so it was like everyone's ideas could be solicited and considered. As far as the application, my recollection is that our form already exists, that it's generic, and it, you know, what's your name, what's your background, and why do you think you'd be good for this is perfect. And so as long as we had a pretty simple description, perhaps drawn out of the ordinance itself, I think the website's already set up. It would be pretty easy then to just say, go here if you're interested in finding out more and want to sign up.
Councilman Miller, then Councilman Duncan. Or do you have a response?
I was just going to add, you're talking about the forms people use to fill out for if they want to be on boards and commissions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah,
exactly.
no, you're right. I hadn't even thought about that. That's a good idea.
It's already there.
Councilman Miller?
I will say I'm kind of against going. Sorry about that. I will say I'm kind of against going against more than 5 voting members wise. But if we wanted to go with 5 citizens and then have that 6th, how you say it, ex officio? What's the?
Ex officio.
Yes, that word. Have it be an ex-council member. I think that would be good, because then that council member can help advise them of what is actually what we're capable of doing from that group standpoint, and then we have the 5 citizen voting members. So
That might be
I see you separate us, now we get to disagree. I'm just kidding.
Councilman Dover.
I think we could prove that the city can move fast enough to get this done in 2.5 months. Actually, 2 3/4 months. Yeah. So maybe, I'm wondering if city attorney can put together some thoughts for that paragraph on, after what you've heard tonight, maybe shoot it out via email and get some responses,
I think we think
get something rolling. Thank you.
Councilman Banks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious as to why we think an ex-council member would be important to this process. I don't see it. I mean, if we want ordinary response from the community, a council member may be biased in some way. I'm against an ex-council member being on the committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Miller.
thank you, Mayor. I agree with you, which is why I said make them not a non-voting member. Giving some advice and being of council is not going to hurt that committee at all. I think it gives them a better insight. And we may end up every single year, how long are the terms? A year?
They have to have a report done within 6 months.
6 months. Okay, so that means we may have 5 new every single year. If I have 5 new citizens who are hearing from a council member or involved in city council meetings and such, I want more people involved in this process going long term. So we may be breeding some new council members out of this issue, is what I'm trying to get at.
Just as a point
Once every
of,
10 years.
yeah. They only meet once every 10 years.
Oh, you know what? Look, I don't take back everything, but I apologize. I thought this is something that we hadn't been doing for a while, and we're going to get back into doing. Something we do every, whatever. Okay, I ain't going to be here.
And none of us were, well, most of us weren't here for that. Any further thoughts?
Just
Councilwoman Hillary?
Just follow up one more. I mean, they're giving advice to us. They're doing a process. It has, generally, the people that have been on it have been people with some sort of government experience, just because they're a little more inside how those things work. But they're not only talking to each other, they're asking us, or they should, I hope they will, as well as the public to have the input. So they're just that working team to try and process all that stuff and give it to us. Thank you. That's all.
Councilman Kelly?
I just thinking, what is everyone think a good deadline is for applications? Like, it's the 8th now, 31 days this month, so November 1st, November 15th.
Brenda?
Brenda did come up with the timeline that they used last time that we can pass around, but the presentation to the council, like I just did tonight, actually happened November 12th last time around in 2013, and then they had nominations that closed on December 3rd, and then the appointments were approved by the governing body on December 15th. So you're already a month ahead.
See?
Or generated a year behind, actually.
Sir? Okay, further comments? Well, I would suggest that any other ideas that you might have, you'd funnel them through city attorney and city manager so that they can take them into consideration and come back with possibly a recommendation for us to move forward. So we can stay ahead.
Like the date.
Okay? No further discussion? Move on to non-action item 7B. Madam Clerk.
B is discussion concerning unlawful camping, amending sections 9, 45, 350, and 360 of the Topeka Municipal Code.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. This item was brought forward by Deputy Mayor Valdivia Acala and Councilmember Dobler. I would defer to them and ask that Amanda Stanley, our city attorney, answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Is Major Cross, city attorney, can Major Cross come up since he was integral in?
Yes, ma'am.
I think her mic was off.
Oh, sorry. He's coming up. He was sitting behind.
Okay. So what this basically does is it is changing up and adding a couple of things. It is, we're going to take this kind of piecemeal. It's going to be adding much more detail to the definition of public infrastructure. It is going to be also adding within 500 feet, no camping allowed within 500 feet of any public infrastructure. So I wanted, since Major Cross was integral when meeting with Councilman Dobler and myself, we've been working on this for, I don't know, feels like since sometime this summer, and thanks to the city attorney as well. But Major Cross, can you please expand a little bit on that definition of how we moved to widen the meaning of public infrastructure and how that was important?
Certainly. In looking to enforce the existing city ordinance regulating camping in the city of Topeka, one of the things we found was that there were pieces and parcels across the city that are parts of our vital infrastructure that were not protected. And so in seeking out and looking at how we better protect those, one of the places we looked was our federal organization that sets to keep us and help mitigate us against disasters, which is FEMA. So we took the FEMA definition of public infrastructure, and what they identify are the key things in a community that keep that community up and running. And there were a few that didn't apply to us. We're landlocked, so obviously like some of the maritime aspects of that FEMA definition didn't fit. However, in looking through it, we were able to find some places where we could expand and better protect our roadways, our bridges, our waterways, our public drinking water, our wastewater. So as we read the definition now, what's now included would be government buildings, government structures, government facilities, government equipment storage or repair locations, facilities operated by the government for public use, bus shelters, roadways, highways, medians, traffic circles, bridges, overpasses, railways was included, flood control works, water delivery systems, wastewater delivery systems, electrical generation systems, electrical transmission systems, communication transmission systems, healthcare facilities, schools, and child care facilities. And you may think to yourself, now some of those are places already where it's obvious you can't set up a camp in a school. However, in order to protect those infrastructures that we know are a vital part of our community, we have to make sure that we're making the areas surrounding those those locations safe and where people feel like they can come and go. So that's how those got expanded. And as I mentioned, we pulled this straight from FEMA's glossary definition of public infrastructure, absent some of the things that don't apply to us just because of how our city is designed, not having ports and such.
Thank you for that, Major Cross. And I think that one of the things that we knew was important is the incident. Well, it hasn't just been one, but the amount of calls that have been coming in, the amount of neighborhood complaints, et cetera, that have been coming also with extended camping times on private property. And so when Councilman Dobler and I were looking this over with Major Cross, and then again thoroughly vetted by the city attorney, there was the addition of lines 26, 27, and 28. And Councilman Dobler, can you help with that as we constructed this?
Certainly. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we talked a little bit. I think the original ordinance, there was a lot of discussion about camping on your own property, things that were kind of outside of the issue that we're talking about here. So we added a definition of camping that does not include camping on property owned by the owner of record, which was there before, or lawful tenant. We added that. And then in the original wording had a 10-day or 10 days within a 6-month period. And then we specifically exempted property that is properly zoned or permitted for really overnight camping, short-term camping, trying to eliminate those areas that are for recreational vehicles and things like that. So we got that added in. And I might just add that the definition of public infrastructure really includes, I mean, this, for a lot of this, it's a safety issue. And probably the one thing I'll point out in there that we had some discussion about was railways. We have issues with folks camping very close to railroad tracks, and that's definitely a safety issue. Electrical transmission systems, there's a lot of things in there that just give us a little bit more control over where people are, if any. You know, you don't want anybody in some of those areas, whether they're camping or not. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. And also, I think that, you know, the whole thing that happened by the nursing home and how undone the owners were of this nursing home and the way that this encampment just plotted down, which was also very close to the train tracks. You know, there was defecation in buckets, as you know, that there was public nudity that was being seen by those that were sitting on this campsite that was close to this longstanding nursing home. I have received from not only in my district, but from across the city, calls and concerns about where the camping has been extended very long on private property to where there are fires that are being set. I don't mean a blaze, but I mean fires at night, you know, issues of people coming and going, of trespassing onto yards because they're trying to get onto particular private property where they have been perhaps allowed or not allowed, you know, to camp. And so what it
helped me to realize, and Councilman Dobler, I believe, understood this early on, as did Major Cross, who helped so much with this, is that it needed to be tightened up. There is nothing about this, no matter what any kind of spin that anyone wants to put on this, that this is punitive in nature. What this is public health and safety. Just like we're trying to come up with the plan and move forward with the plan that will help the unsheltered community, we still understand that we have a house community, that this is one of the main concerns they have, and that is their own public health and safety. So while this creates a tension, for sure, it's a tension that we're going to have to live with until we get to some bottom line solutions on this. So, if there's any questions, if I can't answer it, I'm going to put it over to Major Cross, City Attorney. But that was the impetus for moving forward with tightening this up. Thank you, Mayor.
Any questions for the comment? Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. I was a sponsor of the original ordinance, and one of the things I didn't like that was amended into it, and I said this at the time, although I don't expect this to change, was I don't like that we do only 10 days every 6 months on your own private property. I thought then at that time, I didn't like that amendment in general, but I had asked that it would be 3 months. I'm just going to put that in the universe one more time, but I wish that was 3 months instead of 6 months. At least try to be consistent on that. I support this generally. Here is my concern. And here's something we have failed to do since we enacted the first one, and I think this compounds that problem unless we address this issue while we're also doing this. This will create more areas now that people cannot camp, and I get why. But we already had very limited places that were legal under the original ordinance to begin with. And during this process, when we remove people from a spot and they say to us, okay, where can I go? We direct them nowhere. We just say, that's not my problem, you just can't be here. I think that's put our police department in a tough position at times, right? Because we haven't given that permission or direction. I think there are some parcels of land in this city that we could exempt to at least have some areas that aren't in neighborhoods, that aren't around these public infrastructure spots, that we could at least direct people to, but also continue to have rules to those areas. Same rules that apply to this. You can go here, but you can't be here for more than 10 days in this spot. And all the other laws apply. You can't litter, you can't leave your stuff. I mean, we can sort of set some of those standards. So my only concern with this is not what it's doing, it's that what's going to be the continued impact of that as we push the people who are in some of these spots now. Where do we expect them to go? Because it will be into neighborhoods until the cops are called, or it will be back along the creek until the cops. So I support this. I just think we have got to also now think about what happens simultaneously with this to where those individuals have some place to go, because they can't go out in the county, right? They've totally banned it, and they're not going to leave the city. So it's not like we're going to say move and they're going to say great, I'm out, Topeka, and they're going to leave. Right? So I don't have the answer to that, but I guess, I don't know. I'm not saying you, but I think we have to think about that if and as we do this. So thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, may I?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan, I think if you want to run a resolution on that, that'd certainly be something that we could put up for discussion. I think the comment, about them already being in neighborhoods, in the district that I represent, they're in the neighborhoods. I have on the 1800 block of Atchison by a creek where there are needles, where there are stolen items, where there are people that are coming, from just a hop, skip, and a jump from houses, just right there around 1800 block of Atchison, where people that are homeless are in the middle of the street and they won't move. They sit in the middle of the street and will not move for traffic. So in the district that I represent, they are knee deep in the neighborhoods already. So I understand, the thing about where will they go. I would be open to having those conversations, perhaps set up in a separate, ordinance. I get what you're saying. At this point, because of the number of calls that I received with how much, and again, outside of my district, and it is putting a a lot of work on the Topeka PD to get them moved. But until we can come up with the better remedy, which again, we're working on, and maybe your idea will be one, a component of it, we cannot continue, in my opinion, to have neighborhoods suffer the way they are with this, where they do not even feel safe in their own neighborhood. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Duncan, did you?
Yes, I also have homeless folks in neighborhoods in my district. It is not unique to you, Councilman Valdivia-Acala. And my point is, we are reaching the point where if we don't provide some alternative locations, our only option is to continue to push them or move them around in those areas or start arresting them. And I don't think any of us want to start arresting those individuals. So I'm not supporting this. I just am asking staff, and I'll work with staff on that, to see if we can look at areas around the city that don't bring up these concerns with neighborhoods, near public infrastructure that we've had, but also give some alternatives when those people are in the neighborhoods and they just move from one neighborhood then to the next neighborhood, and then when we push them out, they move back to the old neighborhood, because that's what we've created. It wasn't intentional. It's unintended consequences, and I support all the steps we've taken to this point. I just want us to look at that so that we're aware of that issue, as it continues to happen more, as we limit more space. So that's all, and I'm happy to work on that and with staff and see if we can bring something forward.
Councilwoman Hiller and then Councilman Kell.
I appreciate the concern and the effort on the first page, the loosening up of the language about being able to camp in your own yard was certainly helpful. I am concerned that the change, the broadening of the definition, and then the prohibition may be unintended. I tried to send you guys a note, but if public infrastructure includes everything on this list, in particular roadways, and if electrical transmission systems, communications, wastewater and water means water lines, sewer lines, and overhead electrical wires, then basically, and this says you can't be anywhere in town within 500 feet of any of those basic things, buildings, roads, electrical wires, and so on, then it means that if, let's say you're gonna allow yourself 10 feet for your camp, for your tent and your chair, that nobody could, a diameter of 1,000 feet, 500 feet is roughly a city block. So if you can't have, if it's got to be 500 feet all the way around you, that's 1,000 feet that doesn't have any streets, any utilities, nothing, that's totally undeveloped, would be the only place. We could get rid of all the rest of the language in the ordinance, because that would be the only place this change would allow somebody to be. I know people have already inventoried the properties, but even then, 1,000 feet is the equivalent of almost 2 city blocks. So I'm not sure we even have any place in the city limits where somebody could actually camp with this change. And so it's well intended, but it literally might as well just ban camping, because I don't think there's anything we have that would allow it. A couple of other particular things that I had, but again, if people really mean 500 feet, which means 500 feet every direction around this campsite, you can't be near any of these public infrastructures. I don't think it can be done. So.
Councilman Kell?
I'm good, thank you, sir.
Okay. Further discussion?
I have a question for the city attorney, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. City attorney, since you reviewed this, what Councilwoman, I apologize for the dog, what Councilwoman Hiller is saying right now, is that valid? Was that or not?
Yes, we have greatly broadened camping. There is not a constitutional right to camping, so you can make it a very broad definition of where you would like to ban camping inside city limits. 500 feet is roughly a city block. We talked about that a lot when we did the sidewalks. Whether or not there are parcels still available or not, I do not know. I would have to defer to Major Cross to see whether or not that was looked at when you determine this.
We'd have to do some research on the 500-foot or the diameter, as Councilwoman Hiller put it. You know, the only thing I would point out that kind of goes to that is the Councilmember Duncan mentioned, you know, do we want to designate a place? And one of the things that the city attorney's team pointed out was that, yeah, by coming up with lines 26 through 28, it would allow that camping in a designated place if the city can identify parcels where they want to make it lawful. It wouldn't fall under the definition of camping.
Correct. We did specifically carve that out, so if at a future date you wanted to identify a location, that's already provided for.
Councilman
So
Carroll?
thank you for,
No, I'm sorry.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Did you have
Go ahead.
follow-up,
Go
Deputy
ahead.
Mayor? Okay, Councilman Kell?
I do like the added language on the zoning aspect of things, because that is my fear, kind of scaring away potential places that might want to have a campground. I would almost like to see something added where if someone's working on a home, that, you know, as long as they're showing progress in that home, like they can RV in that parking, in that driveway there. Because I know a lot of people before, you know, maybe 10 years ago, were doing that because they were having so many tools stolen from the property and all that kind of stuff, that this way they can work on those houses, be right next to those tools, so if someone breaks in the house, they're right there. Because I know a few people that gave up on flipping houses because of the simple fact of they'd walk in the next day, all their copper would be gone, all the tools would be gone, so many different things. And so this way they're allowed to kind of keep an eye and an ear on the property that they're trying to flip and better our city with.
Councilman Duncan?
So let me offer something to think about. No one has to answer it tonight, but as we process this, I think it's the public infrastructure thing. I think at the moment, having it so broad, I mean, government buildings, and I think we may get to that point. I would argue some of those buildings already have certain security in place and we can manage that and loitering. I think the ones that are less protected right now or have that built-in advantage are the ones on here that include healthcare facilities, schools, childcare facilities. We can certainly, I would think, amend the ordinance at this point if we wanted to start there by making sure those individuals are protected from the concerns that we have and those areas are taken care of. While maybe we can take a few months to work with staff and see if we can hash out the public infrastructure piece of it a little more, and if there's slabs of land we can find or don't want to find or don't want to go that route. Because I don't want to us either not pass this because of those concerns while we're really at its core also trying to protect those other three categories, because there have been some issues with those specifically that need to be addressed. So I don't know, I'll throw that out for consideration, that maybe there's a way to at least get us to that piece while we figure out the other piece over the next couple months. And so it's just something to think about.
Councilwoman Hiller and then Councilman Kell.
Thank you. I do think, I had a note about what Councilman Kell brought up too. We never did reconcile this ordinance as it is with the fact that it's other sections of the TMC say that it's not legal to be camping out in an RV long-term, and so that is something that's there. I would say a reminder to everyone, we discussed this at length in 2019 through the Public Health and Safety Committee.
I found that.
Yeah, and you know, there we reminded ourselves, we were starting to talk about the riverfront then, that we wanted to allow occasional camping on the river. And so we need to keep in mind that we had other agendas with our city as we consider camping bans. Also, what we did back in 2019 was simply looked at the behavioral elements. And so for a bridge, that might answer your question, was just, you got to follow the local city ordinances. If it's trashy or there's illegal activity or your dog's running around biting people or human waste is on the property, then that's not okay. If you're taking care of it and keeping to yourself and so on, maybe for the time being anyway, it could be let go. And that ordinance that we drafted back in 2019, Councilwoman Ortiz was involved as well, and included, you know, no upfront permits, but it allowed a permit after 3 days. If you weren't following the rules, you'd get a warning and have to go. So something to maybe revisit. Thanks.
Councilman Kell?
It's for the city attorney. On the personal property side of this, does any of what we're adding on the wording of the FEMA definition, does that cancel out any of the personal property aspects of things?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but
So my big thing was when I was saying we should be allowing on personal property, so if some kid wanted to go out and sleep in their backyard, or a Girl Scout troop was going to the scout leader's house and camping in the backyard,
Gotcha.
I want to make sure this is not.
sorry, I was thinking different personal property. I was thinking about like their tarps and sleeping bags
sorry.
and that kind of personal property. This amends it. Sometimes when I write ordinances on the fly in the middle of a city council meeting, I don't get the wording quite right. So we fixed some wording to make it clear that you can camp on private property for not exceeding 10 days within a 6-month period. So that stays the same. It's just worded correctly this time. And then as Councilman Dobler talked about, it takes out the parts like if it's properly permitted for camping, so that you can do that and
I
add
just want to make sure we weren't
Yes,
crossing off one thing by doing another thing, so thank you.
correct.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm definitely open for amendments. I think at this point, probably some maybe do. I'm interested definitely in talking to Councilman Duncan, and if Councilman Dobler is open as well. And so unless there's any other comments, and not to belabor this with meeting time, I'm willing to take it back and get with them tomorrow or the next day and then work up something that is more palatable, and then we'll bring it back. Thank you, Mayor.
We have a gentleman who's raised his hand who would like to make public comment on this. If you would come to the podium and identify yourself.
I don't have any notes. My name is Good Citizen, and the Supreme...
I need your real name, sir.
Good Citizen.
Oh.
I have the right to talk here, First Amendment, to address you guys, so Good Citizen. The Supreme Court gave you the right to manage your community however they want. You can do it. You can just ban everything. You can ban homeless people. You can ban camping. You can ban it all. That they gave you the power to do that. But the earlier meeting was, how are we going to help homeless people? And then now this meeting is, how are we going to screw homeless people? So, excuse my language, but you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth on this one. I don't have any notes, but just want to say, you want to help the homeless, but where are you going to go? You keep pushing them farther and farther out. They're not going anywhere. 75% of people that live homeless are homeless from the community they got homeless in. These are your neighbors. They're not from Honduras. They're from Huntoon. And we have a mental illness problem. And in Menningers, there's a lot of people left over from Menningers that are citizens of this community. And we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And they're not going to go anywhere. So my time.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. No one has signed up for public comment in this section. Move on to announcements. Madam Clerk.
Okay, for the October 15th agenda, we have one proclamation for Disability Mentoring Day. We have 3 board appointments, 1 presentation for Community Resources Council update. On action items, we have a public hearing and ordinance for the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan renewal. We have a public hearing and ordinance for the establishment of the Riverstone Myers Place subdivision RHID. We have an ordinance for a zoning change on Northwest Lower Silver Lake Road. We have an ordinance for zoning code amendments to support housing development, an ordinance on land bank administration of property amendment, and then a labor agreement for the firefighters, resolution for the fleet garage project budget increase, and then a contracts for KBS contractors for the design build for the city fleet maintenance garage project. We also have an ordinance for unlawful camping, and then the resolution for the 2026 fire department fleet replacement. Non-action items include discussion on transfer of property in the land bank. And then November, we don't have a meeting on November 5th due to general elections. And then with the plans of the governing body to interview candidates for the Topeka Police Chief position, on November 6th, the candidates will attend a public meet and greet. Community members are invited to attend the meet and greet, with it to take place from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Hotel Topeka Emerald Ballroom located at 1717 Southwest Topeka Boulevard. Then on November 7th, a special meeting of the governing body has been called by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez for consideration of public chief candidates. For the police chief candidates, the meeting will take place from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at 214 Southeast 8th Street on the second floor. At this meeting, the governing body will recess into executive session for a time period not to exceed 3 hours for consideration of police chief candidates as allowed by KSA 75-4319B1. And then the open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers at the completion of the executive session. And then finally, the November 12th governing body meeting will be held in the City Council chambers.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, but nothing for me this evening.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Councilman Miller.
I will refrain. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Dobler.
Yeah, we've got a long night still ahead of us. I have nothing.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Hofer.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller. Deputy Mayor.
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay. Councilwoman Ortiz. Smokey.
I think Whitney Houston had said it best. I have nothing.
Councilman Banks.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kell.
I have one thing. I want my seat back next meeting.
Okay, there is a need. Yeah. There is a need for 3 executive sessions this evening. We'll start with the first, if the city attorney will read, please.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 60 minutes to discuss one or more matters in litigation or possible litigation deemed privileged under the attorney-client privilege as allowed under KSA 75-4319B2. The open meeting will resume in this room in the Cyrus K. Holiday Building. The following staff will be necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberations: City Attorney Stanley, Chief of Litigation Nick Jefferson, and any other staff this governing body finds useful.
Okay, we've heard the need for executive session. Motion to go into session by Councilman Kell. I'll second the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. We will recess into executive session, give ourselves about 12 minutes for a break. Okay, we've completed our discussions in our first executive session. We are now going into our second executive session after the city attorney reads.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 30 minutes to discuss police response related to security measures as allowed under KSA 75-4319B12. The open meeting will resume in this room of the Cyrus K. Holiday. The following staff will be necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberations: City Manager Perez, Interim Police Chief Holtum, and other staff the governing body finds useful.
Okay, we've heard the need for the
I
second.
would like to move into our executive session.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Motion from Councilman Miller, second by Councilman Dobler. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Smokey? Okay. We have one noted as aye. Aye. Okay, we'll recess immediately into this second executive session.
Ready, Sid? Mayor?
Okay, we've concluded our discussions during our second executive session, and now there is a need for a third executive session. City Attorney, will you read?
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 30 minutes to discuss one or more matters involving legal risk deemed privilege under attorney-client privilege as allowed under 754319B2. The open meeting will resume in this room of the Cyrus K. Holiday Building. The following staff will be necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberation. City Attorney Stanley and other staff the governing body finds useful.
Okay, thank you. Motion to go into executive session from Councilman Miller and second from Councilman Kell. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, oh, two. Okay, we will immediately recess into our third executive session. Okay, we've completed our discussions on the third executive session. No action has been taken. No further business coming before this body. The meeting is adjourned.